Hello, everyone, and welcome to the distribution team demo for today. It is June 3rd of 2021. And today, this is the first kind of public show of what we're doing with the smoke testing of source installs. So just a little bit of a background. We had about 1 or 2 cycles ago, we had a request come in for an update to do systemd-based unit files instead of the init files we provide. And there was a lot of trouble in testing that because you really don't do a lot with source installation or with documentation. When I started working on that, I realized something. As of that period, which was during 13.11 cycle, GitLab and I forget one of our other pieces did not build from source. So now it was making it through in our builds, but if you were following the source install, it wouldn't work. And we've seen this before where folks who are using source install run into these weird issues that don't work. We don't really have a infrastructure thing in place to test it. So this is kind of where this is going, is to provide a way to just smoke test, do our install instructions work, and then also hopefully this will flush out things that may pop up for us. Things like when we updated to a new version of Go, GitLab didn't compile, and we didn't know that until late in the cycle, and we had to back it off right at the end, like the day before release. So we're trying to flush out problems like that early. So this has kind of a couple of things it's going to be used for. Now, to do this, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible for a proof of concept. There are a couple of tenets that I have tried to follow with this. First, separation of concerns, okay? I want the installation to be something that can run in the pipelines. It's going to run in a container, but it can also, I'm going to show you how it also runs out against a local virtual machine. So this will allow people to just download just the script part of this and test it against anything they want to target. And then in our pipelines, we'll have a basic check. And the idea is that there's going to be 3 steps to this. The first step, what I have done today in the pipeline setup, that is I can set up 2 containers in target and my Ansible script can talk to it. That's it. The second part of this demo will be showing what it looks like. Actually, I've already run it because it takes about 15, 20 minutes to compile and build it all. But I have a machine installed locally that has GitLab running from source. And then after that, after all this is proved out, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to work with Nelia, and I'm going to have her help me put QA against this so we can run QA against this as well, just to make sure that our source install instructions all match up, right? But the first thing we need to do is make sure that this actually works. So this is in the GitLab source installer. I will put this into the document, maybe. I will find that document, the notes somewhere. I will not. So I will put it into the Zoom chat and I'll add it afterwards. But this is issue 1. And what we're doing here is, let me put it in the Slack chat because I can find that quickly. Let's see. And if someone could link this into the notes for me. There we go. So what this is going to do is this is going to spin up containers. And you can see here in the pipelines, this is from last night. And there are a couple things that happen. For one, it will pull in an upstream and install target. That's all it's going to do. And then the other thing that this does is it runs a test connection. So this will only run, this is building the controller and the target, and they only run if I change those images. They're both separate container images. And this is the test connection run. Now you can see all I did was an Ansible ping module. Just can I talk to it? But what I've done is instead of running the test on the source install, what I have is the pipeline is running with the Ansible controller as the main. And what I've done is I have actually set up the service, or set up the target installation, the installation target as a service. So if we look at the CI file, let's see here. So we've actually set this up as a service, right? And what this does is this means that I can run the install target in the background. They're on the same item. I can provide it DNS. So now I'm not messing with DNS and setting up a Terraform virtual machine. Shout out and props to Jason Jason Plum and I had a very long discussion in Slack about the pros and cons of doing this with terraforming up a virtual machine versus doing this in the containers. So this is kind of a proof of concept of this as well. So we're flipping the script, right? What we're testing is the service, and then what we're running is the controller. And so this basically is going to set all this up, install a public key, and run this test connection. Now that's what this first MR is to do, just to get the kind of the framework together and say, we agree, this is the way to get the machine up and I can talk to it. But obviously that doesn't install GitLab. So the next part that will come after we prove this out in the pipeline is the Ansible script. Now, this is what that looks like. This is very low proof of concept, okay? This is not designed to be perfect Ansible. This is designed to work, and we'll clean it up once we prove that this is a thing that's useful. So we install, this is basically every single step of the build dependencies. I will probably iterate this out later to separate it into sectional steps so that each step matches the steps in the documentation so that we have a cleaner run on this. But this is installing Giddily, creating directories, setting up users, building the source code. It does all the last bits. And this goes all the way as far down as to it creates workhorse and the sockets. The last bits that I do not have in the Ansible script, I have in this real quick. So I was trying to get them to work. This was a thing at the end of last week. I was just trying to quickly get this in to run. And all that runs now on this. Okay. Here we go. So this is my local instance. This is not accessible from the internet. This is just on my local network. But I can do anything you want here. So this proves out that, yes, I have a source install. When I first did this work, I had to add a lot of manual patches for 13.11. The hope is that after we do this, we'll be able to catch those not release source with the need to have folks go in and manually know how to, like, it was things like patching the make file to get the right version of git commands because they changed which command line arguments they were giving git, or they would change things to the make command because they had it was in a halfway state. So let's see, let's do my usual project. Yeah, so I mean, you can go in here to issues, database works, everything is here. That's probably trademarked. Let me change it to generic. Right. So this is just showing that GitLab can run. So that is basically the entirety of where I'm at, right? I can install a local virtual machine, and I have proven out that I can connect. I can connect with Ansible to that machine. So the next step is, once this framework is approved, and Demetrio has already been looking at it, merge that, take the Ansible bit, put those last like 5 or 6 commands on, merge that on top, we'll have a smoke test. And then from there, I think Nelly and I will partner up to put some QA stuff up against it and make sure we can bump on it with the rest of our pipelines. But this will give us a base smoke test for that install. And then the next step after that is we're going to have to talk to Doc's team and figure out how to keep this. Here's the documentation. Here's the smoke test. How do we keep that aligned, right? Because we don't want that. We want this to be a low key. We don't want to make this an extra source of tension and support. But we do need to make sure that, like, how we get the documentation for a source install and this script to stay aligned. And that's the total of kind of what I have for today. And now I'll open it up for questions.
Can you just show the page that's got the versions so you can show where it was built from source, or what it looks like in the app? Yeah. In the instance.
Okay.
Where it shows what version is running.
So here.
Yes. Setting. Okay. Yeah.
It's not there. It's settings, I think. General, maybe. Actually, no. It's in the admin. It's up here.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
this should be 1312, I think. 1311.4. So it's 13, sorry, it was 1310 that didn't build. 1311.4 works. So but yeah. So this is a current source install.
Gotcha. Okay.
I said the Ansible playbook will be up for review after we merge the other piece, just because I wanted to get the proof of we're gonna do it in pipelines, but with VMs done first. I wanted to keep the MR as small as possible, so that whoever has, this is kind of it's a birthing MR, so there's a lot in there already to just stand things up. I wanted to keep all the extra Ansible bits out so that we proved out these machines can talk, and then we can come back and do the rest, just for iteration's sake. Because nobody likes a 3,000 line MR. At least not not any reviewers do. So, but yeah. So these are the last steps to do. The thing that I find interesting, and I'm still trying to figure this part out, when you get Giddily in and you start it up, it doesn't always go fast enough to where this is ready right away. So I'm trying to figure out what the command returns back when I do this command. I think when was it? One of these, I think it was this one. It somehow takes this one. It somehow takes a minute after all the install finishes for it to know that it can actually run. I'm trying to track that down because I don't like things that are indeterminate. So yeah. Other questions?
So was it entertaining figuring out how to get the services to work in this regard?
Entertaining is a word. I'm trying to figure out how I can go about proactively making a documentation change to make that a lot easier to figure out. Because it was not straightforward, and there's documentation for it. And like, I found 2 places, and when Jason, why don't you look at this? It was the 3rd place that it's documented that I hadn't found yet. And that was what had the kind of the magic sauce. So I'm going to try and figure out how to make that more discoverable. As far as the services themselves, it's nice to have that direct name. So that is very handy, especially in the Ansible inventory setup. It's not bad. I don't know that I'm using it the way it's intended, so we'll see. The one thing I find kind of off-putting, and Metro had pointed out trying to use different connection. So the containers, the way I make it run is I have to install SSH into the container because Ansible connects over SSH. But then SSH as a service doesn't necessarily run as the entry. So my entry is kind of a blatant hack. This is one of those don't laugh, it works. I just start the service and then I tell null. That's how that container stays up for the GitLab container, because then they'll never fail, right? I don't want to depend on the service running or not running or whatever. So I made it tail null, and I find that to be kind of hacky, but it works. And the other thing is, when reading about having SSH in a container, a lot of folks say that's a really bad idea to have SSH running inside of a container. So for a pipeline for testing in a local environment, because it's not accessible to the outside world, I don't see it as a huge problem. I'm going to once I have this done, I'm going to tap Andrew and have security take a look at it and be like, hey, I've seen up and down on this. Do you have an opinion? And get some more feedback that way. And the other piece of this is that Demetro has suggested trying the Ansible has a Docker connection. Like, you can switch your connection type from SSH to Paramiko, and they also have a Docker connection that is now part of Upstream. I tried on that last night, hoping to try and work that into today's demo. And the answer was no, it didn't work. At least I couldn't get it to work. So if anybody's interested in pinging on that, this containers use Docker connection branch on the installer. If anybody wants to take a look at that, see what they can figure out, I'm open to suggestions. I'm gonna move on to get the rest of it done because I feel like this can be an iteration down the road. But I figure if anybody's interested, this was the other piece of this services thing, because then we can drop the services all together and have it all run this way. Do a Docker
I'll
and Docker
tinker
with
with
Docker
it.
inside.
I'll tinker with it.
Okay. Yeah, I decided discretion was the better part of hour last night. Moved on.
Not
So
a bad idea. So when it comes to the SSH, I understand that, like, generally speaking, for a actual service container, it doesn't make sense to have SSH in there. You really don't want to be doing that unless you have something that actually needs to use the SSH protocol. Yeah. But for what we're using it for and the way we're using it for right now, it's the best available tool to us. So it makes total sense. The only trick is to make sure that it's, locked appropriately, so that it's only being spoken to over the network it needs to be accessed over. That's pretty much it. At the same time, it's not like we're running this as a privileged container. It's in a CI job.
yeah, threat surface and profile are very low. So while it's not best practice, it's within the realm of acceptable risk. So yeah, exactly.
Well, if we would ever want to take it outside of this context of just the testing and providing it as a solution to somebody else to use it outside of just testing, then it becomes a problem.
Well, here's the thing. If they're wanting to do a source install inside of a container, then if we figure, well, I haven't tried doing the Docker local install on a Docker local machine without being inside of Docker and Docker. Because from what I can tell, and this is where I kind of stumbled into it, in the Docker community plugin for the Docker connection, it looks like when you tell it give a host, because you can give Docker Ansible Docker extra connection args, where you can give it like TAC-H and give it the right connection type for Docker and Docker's container. The semantic version verification that happens at the start of the module does not seem to honor that. So it's like a check inside of Ansible. So it might actually be an upstream bug, but it does show up when it runs it. So I'm not sure what it's doing. And that's it. That merits more investigation. So, but yeah, but like I said, most folks I think doing source installs, they're doing it in virtual machines, seems like. And this will target that easily. So. And there is one other interesting tidbit that might be an oddity. And we saw this with full-scale automation. I think I probably need to put the SSH port on an alternate port, because once GitLab is up and running, it's going to take over port 22. So that'll be a conflict.
I think there's a way to configure it to share, but I don't remember off the top of my head. It probably would honestly just be easier logistically to separate the ports.
Yeah. So. So yeah. So any other questions, comments? I'll take that as a couple of crickets. That seems like we're at the end here. I think it's 1 or 3, 2,
Thanks, Robert.
1. Yep, we're good. Thanks all.